Hello and welcome to the Randolph College Blended Learning Workshop 2016. My name is Eric Ramey. I'll be your host for this workshop. Some of you I already know and I look forward to seeing you all again. If not, I will look forward to meeting you in a couple of weeks. Now, because this is a blended learning workshop, I thought it was apropos that we actually use some blended learning techniques, and thus we're going to be spending a little bit of time ahead of the workshop, actually having you go through a couple of videos, do some readings, and then fill out a little bit of a questionnaire and some homework for you online. This might be a little bit surprising considering the fact for those of us from the Educational Technology Department, we frequently will fly 1,000 or 2 miles to like the EduCause Learning Initiative conference and sit in a stuffy room and have people lecture to us about their wonderful pedagogical innovations. Hopefully we'll be able to avoid some of that in this workshop. What I'd like for you to be able to do at the end of this is not only learn a little bit about the blended learning techniques itself, but also spend some time discussing some of the good things, some of the pitfalls, and also at the very end of it, develop a module that you can actually take with you and hopefully drop into one of your classes and hopefully be able to use in an actual setting. So what do we mean in this case just by blended learning? Specifically in this case, there's a variety of different definitions. They might be blended, you might hear the word hybrid or flipped or hybrid, and all of them are basically the same thing. You'll get into definitions about what percentage of the course has to be flipped or blah, 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 blah. It really doesn't matter. The end goal or the end result of all of this is that you take a traditional college classroom like this one, where you have somebody up in the front lecturing and you have a bunch of content on the wall. And what you'll do is you'll take this content out and you'll place it someplace else. Traditionally, this is done on the web. There's a variety of other places you can put it. But you're going to take the content away from the class itself and put it someplace else. There's a variety of different ways to do this. The way that I'm doing it through a screencast right now is one of the most obvious. There's a variety of other ones. We'll talk about some of those potential options. But the basic idea is to take that content away and take the traditional lecture, have people read stuff at home, test them, and flip that so that the majority of your class time is spent with the students doing other things, specifically mostly active learning. In other words, things that the students are actively taking part in, discussions, simulations, games, whatever they might be. It is typically much more peer-oriented, specifically collaborative, cooperative, peer-assisted type learning. One of the advantages of this method is that it specifically pushes learning to the students. In other words, it forces them to become part of it. They can stop being as passive as they often are and forces them to take more of an active role in learning the content themselves. It is, in many cases, problem-based. In other words, rather than thinking about the content specifically, what you want to do is think about specifically higher order thinking skills, synthesis and things like this. The ability to solve complex problems, to be able to draw in multiple bits of information from other ways. So how much can we do of that? And specifically, again, more and more student-centered, not instructor-centered. You've become, the classic example of this is you become the sage on the stage in a lecture. Well, in this case, you're going to become the guide on the side. In other words, the students will be doing the primary amount of learning. You're going to be there when they get stuck to sort of help smooth out the bumps and things like that. So, in any case, what are we going to do with the actual workshop itself? One of the things I want to focus on in the workshop is specifically looking at learning goals. And that will be the first thing we're going to do, because you should ask yourself, when you get the chance to really look at your course and take some time to think, well, I might do some flipping or take the time to redesign this, why not take a look at the learning goals specifically? So in this case, let's ask about what are the learning goals of this workshop. Well, there's a couple of them. First one, obviously, is to understand blended pedagogy. In other words, what does it mean to be blended? How do you do that? What is it, what's the history? What's the background? Is there any evidence for how that works and everything else? What do you do about changing your learning goals? One of the things that we can talk about is the fact that your learning goals, for example, should become more active. When you think about a lot of the learning goals you might write, they might say things like will understand or something like that. These are very passive sort of learning goals. You want to think about what can they do rather than what might they know. How do you go about designing content modules? What would you look at? What is good content to put on the web and what is not good content to put on the web? How would you go about taking that content and manipulating it into a module that you could place out on the web in a coherent fashion so that the people in the class will understand what they need to know before they show up? What sort of activities can you do in class? As I said, some of these will be obvious things like discussion, but some cases you might not have a good discussion ability, or some cases you might want to do more things. You might want to do simulations, you might want to play games, and there's a variety of different options. We can talk about a few of those. And finally, should your assessments change? In a lot of cases, for natural science courses especially, you're used to the idea that we're going to have an exam at the end of the course. And that's obviously a good way to do it if you have a lot of content that people actually need to know. But are there other ways that you might need to be assessing them if you're going to use some of these active learning techniques? And in some cases, that may not be a huge change. It might only be a few percentage points of the grade, but you should be thinking about ways to assess the active learning portion of it as well as the passive, or not passive, but test-based ones. Understand maybe a little bit about the potential problems. What is it potentially going to happen if you screw up? What are the bad things that might happen? Are you going to get student resistance? Are you going to potentially have real problems generating the content? What happens if technology fails in the classroom? Something like that. There's a variety of different things you might want to think about, but none of them are potentially catastrophic. I want to teach you a little bit about the common tools. In this case, for example, I'm using a Microsoft Surface tablet with two programs, Camtasia and OneNote, to generate this. I'll be hosting this on YouTube and displaying it in a WordPress site. So all of that is sort of bundled together. We'll talk a little bit about that. I can't go into great depth, but I'd like to at least give you an idea of what some of the tools look like out there. And then finally, the most important part of this is I want you to actually sit down and work your way through. We'll walk through the process of how to develop a module. How do you redesign learning goals? How do you think about the content and everything else? And hopefully by the end of this, you'll have an object that you'll be able to take, go to your class or go to before your class, develop that, and then drop it into your class and actually give it a try and see how it goes. It doesn't have to be the whole class, but maybe a lecturer or two might switch over to an active content and give you a chance to actually try this for real. So with that said, what I'm going to do at the end of this is we're going to have a couple more videos for you to watch as well as some readings. You can get to do those before you show up to the workshop. I have a quick survey. We can call it a quiz if you want, but it's really just a survey. I'm not going to score you on this or anything like that. And then we have a little bit of homework in that you're going to have to write out a little bit about what the module you might want to do here. So for example, you're going to go to the web page and give me a little bit of information. What class you're interested in, what do you think you might be able to gain from this, what are you worried about, and all the rest of that. So with all that, I'm going to sign off on this video and let you take a look at the rest of them. Thank you.